During CES, I had the opportunity to watch Nvidia's CEO speech, which included the new GPUs and graphics cards. In the end, after the smoke settled down, things proved not to be as he described them, especially regarding the pricing strategy. Unfortunately, this is typically the case with every new GPU release. Since I'm not in talking terms with Nvidia and no board partner could send me an RTX 5090 at this period, I was forced to buy one to bring you this review with detailed power and noise analysis information, besides performance on countless games and settings. I find it difficult to believe that some actually believe that the RTX 5090 is efficient from the moment it maxes out the power capacity of the 12-volt 2x6 cable, leading to countless problems so far. In today's review, I will provide data showing that the RTX 5090 is a step backward in terms of efficiency, aka performance per watt, and I admit that I didn't expect such results. From the moment Nvidia is left entirely alone in the high-end GPU field, with AMD staying in the mid and low market segment, and Intel restricted to the budget GPU categories, there is no one to push Nvidia to improve its products further. However, I must admit that AMD delivered way more than expected with Radeon RX 9000 models, which I will evaluate next week. Besides not having optimal performance and efficiency, Nvidia can also decrease production and focus more on AI, which is more profitable than gaming, leading to sky-high prices. To make matters even worse, besides the RT50 paper launch, we also have to deal with several significant issues with a few graphics cards sold, from missing ropes to melted connectors, because Nvidia's engineers weren't capable or didn't have the required time or weren't instructed to implement a proper protection features circuit on this design. Given the 600 watt of sustained power that passes through the RTX 5090's 12-volt 2x6 header, there should be overcurrent and over-temperature protection on all required pins to save the day when cable or header temperatures go wild. The needed protection features are not there on these super expensive graphics cards, leaving users in distress and feeling helpless, trying to find solutions to protect the costly parts, given that they were lucky enough to score an RTX 5090 or 5080. This is unacceptable, but we can do nothing since Nvidia currently has the monopoly in the high-end and not only GPU market. Relative performance per watt raster, top overall performance at FHD, but the performance per watt is not that impressive. At QHD, the RTX 5090 is 9% away from the 4090 but loses significantly in performance per watt since its power consumption goes through the roof at higher resolutions. To give you an idea, at Cyberpunk in ultra settings mode without DLSS, the 5090 has 421 watt average power consumption, while the 4090 has a 325 watt average. The 5090 destroys the 4090 in average performance at UHD, but still it cannot beat it in performance per watt since the difference in power consumption between these two exceeds 100 watt, 496 watt versus 385 watt. Relative performance and performance per watt, ray tracing. With ray tracing enabled, we have the best performance at FHD and a not so high performance per watt ratio. At QHD, the 5090 starts to show its teeth, but the power consumption increases notably, so it cannot score first at performance per watt. At 4K and with ray tracing enabled, the performance difference between the 4090 is clear. allowing the 5090 to take first place in performance per watt, not by a large margin though. Relative performance and performance per watt, ray tracing and DLSS. With ray tracing and DLSS enabled, the 5090 leads at FHD, but it loses notably at performance per watt. At QHD, the 5090 is at the top, but once more, it isn't so impressive in performance per watt. At 4K, the 5090 is the clear winner, but for another time, it cannot beat the 4090 in performance per watt. Relative performance and performance per watt, ray tracing and DLSS and FG. With frame generation enabled, the 5090 is far away at FHD from the 4090, still it loses in performance per watt. At QHD the performance gap widens and the performance per watt improves, still it cannot beat the 4090. The performance difference with the 4090 remains significant, but still the performance per watt is not higher but almost similar at 4K. The 5090 is a power hog and this doesn't help in the performance per watt charts. The 5090 has excellent rendering performance in DaVinci Resolve, but the notably more affordable 5080 is not far behind, and the same goes for the 5070 Ti. Top performance in Blender, low temperatures in everything I tried because the Asus stuff has a huge and highly capable cooling system. Despite the high power consumption in 3D Max Speedway, the GPU's operating temperature is kept low. Compared to other cards, noise is high at full speed and pretty high at 75% speed. On the contrary, it is low at 50% speed. Thanks to the fan stop feature, most graphics cards are dead quiet at idle and multimedia. The Asus stuff RTX 5090 is also dead silent at rendering. During short gaming periods, the Asus card is silent. On the contrary, in 3D Max Speedway benchmark, noise output is high since the card pulls 600 Watt from the PSU. In Fairmark, where the card is stressed, the output noise is close to 37 decibels, which is high. If you want to look at the detailed frequency analysis, which is important since you can see which frequencies are the most annoying, read the review on hwbusters.com. The noisy frequencies are 6.3 kHz at below 50% speeds, 160 Hz at 50% to 62% fan speed, 1.25 kHz at 64 to 75% fan speed, and 400 Hz at full fan speed. Power consumption at idle is high with 1 or 2 monitors connected. Media playback power consumption is increased. Gaming power consumption is sky high, especially at 4K. Peak power consumption goes through the roof. 3D Max Speedway. For the RTX 5090, you will need a strong PSU and stock airflow inside your chassis unless you install it on an open bench system. The RTX 5090 is right at its TDP at Fairmark and rendering uses a lot of power, 50 Watt more than the 4090. The peak power consumption is notably higher than what I measured in the Asus RTX 4090. As I mentioned before, the 5090 is a power hog. Overclocking. I dialed up to the maximum possible for the GPU's boost clock at 32,202 MHz for the VRAM, the top allowed by GPU tweak and the maximum permitted boost clock. I also allowed for the 3% increase in the power target. I didn't mess with GPU voltage because I noticed some issues when I did. There is no temperature difference between stock and overclock speeds because the power consumption difference is low and the cooling system is competent, managing effectively the GPU's thermal load. The power consumption difference between standard and overclocked modes is low since the card already operates at the limit of 12V 2x6, but the total power consumption reading, is high. The performance gain is low since the RTX 5090 is already maxed out, almost at the official limit that the 12V 2x6 permits in power consumption. The cooling system looks pretty good, but we must also examine the GPU clocks to get the complete picture. The GPU clocks are not that high because during Fairmark the GPU draws 600 watt from the PSU. The RTX 5090 is a powerful graphics card, the strongest available today. Still, I would be lying if I didn't mention that I was expecting way more after 2 years of the 4090's release, especially in performance per watt. The 5090 pushes the 12V 2x6 connector to its maximum power delivery, 600 watt, so we already see problems with melted connectors and or headers, even though very few RTX 5090 became available and sold so far. If the operating conditions are not close to the optimal ones, meaning high ambient temperatures, and if the 12V 2x6 cable is not of high quality or it is aged and extensively used, pulled in and out of the header many times, then you have the perfect recipe for disaster. Unfortunately, Nvidia's engineers didn't consider implementing per pin, OCP and OTP to protect the 5090 from overheating its header. This is why we are now developing a cable that will include these protection features. The cable will cut power to the graphics card and save the day if something goes wrong, but this is not our job. It should be Nvidia's in the first place. While performance is high enough, I cannot say the same for performance per watt. The RTX 5080 and 5070 Ti are way more efficient. Even the H 4090 offers higher performance per watt in most scenarios I tested. Remember that all have to do with the games you use for benchmarking, and I used many popular game titles with numerous settings. I cannot cover all cases, but I try to provide the most complete picture of the RTX 5090's performance. In general, I cannot recommend the RTX 5090 not only because it is an energy hog and it can be dangerous in the long, even the short run because of its extremely high power consumption under stress, but it is also super rare to find, at the time of this video at least, and super expensive. I wonder why someone would pay so much money to get a graphics card like this one and always feel scared that each connector may melt. Usually I'm not afraid while benchmarking and don't have a problem leaving the test system unattended. Still, during some of the 5090 benchmarks, I caught myself worrying and checking the connector. I even installed thermal probes on it to monitor it, noticing up to 65 degrees Celsius operating temperatures on the 12V 2x6 connector on the GPU send with a relatively low ambient, 22 degrees, after 10 minutes of 3D Max Speedway running at 4K. You should also keep in mind that the PCI Express 5 bus interface of most RTX 50 graphics cards, especially the FE ones, has compatibility issues with the PCI Express expansion card that I use for Pownetics, with only the Galaxy RTX 5080 Ti working fine so far. This means that most PCI Express extension cables will probably have issues, and the only way to cope with this is to set the GPU's PCI Express bus to 4 through your mainboard's BIOS. You won't lose anything notable in performance, and you can use your PCI Express extension cables without any issues. The overall FPS improvement is close to 9% for all three resolutions, while the FPS per watt improvement is close to 10%, meaning that there is loss there, not improvement. Without the option plus DLSS, where the 5090 is hammered by Warhammer and The Last of Us, the overall performance improvement on all three resolutions I tested is 12.15% from the RTX 4090, while the FPS per watt loss is restricted to around 6%. So, feel free to choose what makes you feel better from this table. The Asus TUF RTX 5090 is a high power consumption and super expensive graphics card, offering a notable improvement over the previous flagship, the RTX 4090, mostly at 4K resolutions. The problem is that you won't be able to find it at a price close to its MSRP, if you find it at all, at the time of the video at least. If you buy now an RTX 5090, match it with an RTX version 3.1 PSU with a proper quality high power cable and avoid using adapters. You will find the best RTX version 3.1 PSUs on hwbusters.com. You will also find the full article on this site with hundreds of charts to explore. It took me so many hours to write this review and to do this video, so go to the site and read 1 or 2 pages at least. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That's all, guys. Bye bye.